from thedailyinfusion.com, where you can learn how to reclaim health, create wellness, and transform your life. I'm so happy to have Barbara Carrellas here with us today. Hi, Barbara.
Hi,
Barbara is an author, life coach, sex educator, university lecturer, workshop facilitator, motivational speaker, and theater artist. Her most recent books include Ecstasy is Necessary, A Practical Guide to Sex, Relationships, and Oh So Much More, Urban Tantra, Sacred Sex for the 21st Century, and Luxurious Loving, Tantric Inspirations for Passion and Pleasure. Her pioneering Urban Tantra workshops were named Best in New York City by Time Out New York Magazine, and she's been featured in the TLC series Strange Sex, HBO's Real Sex, and so much more. I'm just so happy to have you. Hi.
Hi. I'm so glad we're finally getting to do this.
I know. I heard you through another person that I interviewed, Ray Ferrick Biggs, who's the founder of Sexability. You did his workshop, and I found your work so fascinating. And then I looked up your episode on strange sex, and it's just, I think it can be really beneficial for the chronic pain community in so many ways, because everything is energy. And when it comes to people who have certain sensations in their bodies, they don't always realize they have more control over that than
Correct.
just by using those things. So can you just explain a little bit more about how you made these connections with using the breath to activate certain centers in the mind to activate pleasure?
It really started back in the 80s during the AIDS crisis. So, in fact, there's always been a healing bent toward my work because it's how it started. I was in the theater, and I was in the Broadway theater. So when the AIDS plague began, I was in one of the places where we noticed it first. Obviously, there are a lot of gay men in the theater, and we're in New York. So I went to a group, a support group, when the plague had really taken on truly deadly and devastating proportions. I went to the New York Healing Circle, and really my motivation in beginning to study Tantric and Taoist sexualities, Eastern forms of sexuality, was simply that I wanted to find a way for my gay male friends, colleagues, to have sex that was as mind-blowing as it had been on drugs, in all-night disco raves. And I wanted a spiritual component, because when you deal with that level of illness, that level of loss, and that level of grief, there's just a spiritual need that needs to be filled. Even whether or not you believe in God, there is still a spiritual component to being human. And I, having abandoned Catholicism many years earlier, was living essentially an aware but religion-free life. And the work of Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life, which came out in the mid-'80s, a friend gave it to me in probably when it first came out, 84-ish. And by 88, it was my Bible, because it was the only way that I actually could maintain a positive attitude for any period of time. So, and this support group was based on her teachings, since she was the only one at the time, with Carolyn Mace in Chicago, I guess, who had any sort of positive approach to AIDS. So, New York Healing Circle. I met there Annie Sprinkle, the now performance artist and former porn star, and Joseph Kramer, the founder of the Body Electric School and now eroticmassage.com and Sexological Bodywork. At the time, they obviously, he being a gay man, she being a porn star, and me being in the theater, we were all in the middle of the play. So we started asking questions like, what are we going to do about sex? When people start feeling a little better, or, even before they start feeling better, but this plague is just going to go on and on and on, and eventually people who are now not having any sex will go back to having sex. And this plague will go on and on and on. So can we find an alternative way to have sex? That was the question. Long story into getting how breath leads to pain, but an important one, because often the accidental path
Mm.
is where the answer is. And finding that one of the first things we learned studying Tantra were breath and energy orgasms. That's what our teacher called them. Someone else with a more Taoist tradition called it ecstasy breathing. And we started doing these breath processes, and first a whole lot of grief came up, unsurprisingly.
Mm.
And then we started to notice in the people that we were teaching them to, it seemed that it went far beyond sex. First, grief would come up, but then this lightness of spirit, this pleasure, and then a certain sense of connection, either to the group or to the room or to some spiritual source of wellness, some sense of knowing, some sense of inner knowing. It was going way beyond just having some erotic pleasure, way beyond that. Not that there's anything wrong with just erotic pleasure,
Sure.
but it was just a bigger event.
Yeah.
And I think my take on what happened for a lot of people playing with that technique at the time, certainly me, Annie, and Joe, was that the emotional component, the emotional release, seemed to allow for a lot more possibilities of healing.
Sure.
The fact that that tightness, that sense of if I move it hurts,
Yeah.
that constriction and contraction, breath opens up the body in a gentle and powerful way to be able to accept something else.
Yeah, you know what's so interesting is I actually worked with an integrative breathwork practitioner and my own healing when I was recovering in bed. And I called it like, it was like you can do therapy and meditation combined, where we combined certain breathing techniques, and it allowed me to access things in my subconscious that I wasn't necessarily aware of consciously. So I could work through those issues and I could let them go and release them via the breath. It was an amazing, enlightening, awakening experience, very healing. And my whole body would throb during these things. And it wasn't like I was trying to achieve an energy orgasm or anything like that. It was really release, which is, I guess, the same thing.
Which is what orgasm is.
Yes, it's the same thing.
It really is all the same
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
It's the human mind that needs to categorize all this into that's
Totally.
sex and that's healing and that's something spiritual. It's really all the same thing. So, as I often say, sex is just energy, life force energy. There's no difference between going to work energy and going to school energy and scrubbing the floor energy, walking the dog energy, and all way over there is sex. It just doesn't work that way.
Right.
It's all the same thing. So it's really just how you prefer to access it.
Right.
And since my days with people with AIDS, I've used breath processes essentially based on what I originally learned. It's really funny. I've done a lot of explorations into all sorts of breath work. And what it really comes down to, and I'm going to quote Stan Groff of holotropic breath work, just breathe a little more fully and deeply than you usually do.
It's that simple.
I have studied breathe in that nostril and that one, take it a little, relax here, do that. And they all have an effect. But you don't need to know any of that stuff if you just breathe a bit more fully and deeply than you usually do and keep breathing that way.
So what did you notice in terms of like who you were attracting to this as you were beginning these workshops? And did you notice there were a lot of people who were coming to you that were struggling because they had pain or sexual pain or any of these issues where they wanted an alternative?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And when you say you can have an orgasm just by breathing, people who are struggling with things like chronic pelvic pain, it's in a different part of the body.
Right.
So people are a little more willing to go, well, I'm not sure I'm going to have any pleasure because I'm in too much pain, but at least you're asking me to focus on a place that doesn't hurt. My lungs are okay.
Right.
And so it can be a way of introducing the body to something at least benign and maybe pleasurable, that brings some, as we were saying, tension release, relaxation to the whole being. And even just a slight buzz from the breath, I feel kind of spacey, is such an improvement when you've been contracted in pain.
It's true. It's so
And
true.
one of the things that I've always been passionate about and have not done enough with, although I'm working on it, is I've always said, well, this is perfect for people who cannot have orgasms for whatever reason. And we'll talk about this as we go on. I mean, I'm talking from quadriplegics down to vaginismus. I mean, just whatever. But my original thing was, wow, what if this would help women who'd had clitorectomies regain a sense of all the things orgasm gives us? What does orgasm gives us? It gives us connection to self, other, all that is. It gives us this enormous release of tension. I believe it's the body's reset system or reboot button.
Yeah.
And this sense of peace and relaxation. And I can't imagine never being able to have that because something got broken, taken away, or damaged. So it's my hope in the future to teach women in various Western communities who have had clitorectomies the technique so that they can start passing it on to their communities, and it will eventually just be part of the tradition of healing around this. That's my dream.
It's wonderful. I love that. What did you notice when you were working with these people in terms of how it benefited their health conditions even? Like, did you notice that there was a correlation? Like, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's it's you and I can talk about this because we believe in the magic of alternative healing.
Yeah.
Many people would say, well, we can't prove it. There's been no study. It's all anecdotal. But I've seen people in the late stages of cancer feel enormously better after seeing something sexy on their DVD player. It doesn't, not hardcore porn, unless that's what they're into,
Sure.
but just something light and sexy and fun.
Yeah.
Or very sexy and intense and fun. The pain relieving possibilities of erotica are far greater than we will admit. I've seen the overriding, most common to everybody, is a reduction in pain, a sense of a bit of renewed energy, a feeling of relief of whatever the previous feelings were, and a sense of hope and possibility. Those would be the big ones.
And just having that sense of possibility is like the gateway to almost all healing, because if we get stuck in our minds that way, that there's only one way to heal and this is not going to work, or that's the trap, then it won't work. Our belief is that powerful.
Or this isn't going to get any better, it's hopeless,
Right.
which is so easy to fall into with any chronic condition.
It's true. It's so loud that it can really...
Good word, yeah.
Yeah,
good word.
Distracting. It can be very distracting. So getting centered on the breath like that, it helps us tune inward so we can connect with that higher place, the energy body, really. It's energy, because everything is energy.
And also, for people who don't want to have or can't have sex because of some chronic condition, learning, and this came from all the studies with Tantra, learning to have sex in a different way. For instance, what if your partner can just touch you sensually in holding kind of ways that feel good, and ways that feel safe, and ways that don't feel threatening or disappointing, and be with you while you just breathe into those feelings.
Yeah.
Until you get kind of melty and it feels sensual, and then it stops when you're feeling good. It doesn't have to go into what we traditionally think sex looks like.
Right. Because there's so much more just besides the physical aspect of it. There are people who have emotional pain and emotional blocks and the mental blocks to being touched. They might not have, the physical symptoms or chronic pelvic pain, but there's emotional pain associated with the act. And redefining that, how freeing that can be.
In fact, you bring up a good point.
Yeah.
You asked who were some of the first people who came to me after my work with people with AIDS, and it was women who'd been sexually traumatized.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure, I'm not just beginning, but I'm consistently fascinated with trauma states and how the body heals from trauma states. And Stephen Levine's work being particularly powerful. And a very good friend of mine is in a long program with Mr. Levine now. So we have a lot of conversations as he finishes each module. And one of the things that I found the most fascinating was how animals complete the trauma cycle right away.
Mm-hmm.
And for people who aren't familiar with this, they use the example of a polar bear running away from a helicopter and trying to run away from a helicopter. And they're trying to shoot it with a dart to anesthetize it in order to do something positive for the animal. They're not trying to kill it. And when they lift off, and just before the polar bear or whatever bear comes to, you see the polar bear running and shaking and trembling, and then finally getting still, and then it wakes up.
Yep.
It was caught in the middle of the trauma response, but before it came to, its body completed the trauma response.
Right.
And therefore, it walked away going, that was odd, but it was no longer traumatized. We don't get to complete the trauma response, and it can't be done in talk therapy.
I agree. I agree. We have to physically experience all of the energy that's going through our being, and we are told to stuff that down so much in this society. Don't cry. It's okay. It's okay. Well, no, something really physically affected you, emotionally affected you. All of that stuff needs to run out of us, just the way the polar bear does.
Right.
Any being.
So, in those days when those people were coming to me, interestingly enough, I was doing 50% of my practice was doing erotic massage workshops with conscious breath, the breath work that we've been talking about, sensual touch, and genital touch in a very specific and precise way, based on the work Joe Kramer had been developing. And you're very in control. You are like, a little more, please. Don't like that. Stop that. More of that.
Right.
And in other words, the receiver is really the one in control. And the combination of erotic touch and breath is incredibly powerful and can take you on long, amazing journeys. These women, and they were women at the time, were using this process to go into, in many cases, those trauma states. There was yelling, there was screaming, there was thrashing. And from, I will assume, and I was told by some, and I'm assuming some others, a lot of people who had frozen during sexual assault, which is incredibly common.
Sure.
And it's one of the survival mechanisms we have. And they were essentially completing the trauma cycle on the table.
Wow.
So it was fascinating. It was so rewarding. It was truly amazing. Now today I get a wide variety of people. Some looking for something to heal, because don't we all have something? And some looking for what I call the something more factor, which is, I know there's something more out there if I can just let go and find it.
Wow. So people who are on more of a spiritual journey, I suppose, that they are interested in maybe expanding their consciousness on different levels instead of just staying in the mental body or what we're told about sex or That's interesting. And when they come to you, what are their reactions? How do they react after they have that first
Usually
introduction?
it's the, oh my God, I had no idea this was possible. And
Mhm.
if this is possible, what else is possible?
Mm,
And that's the breakthrough moment.
wow.
When the ceiling cracks and there's a new sky full of possibilities, that's the aha moment.
Mm.
Because then all sorts of alternatives to whatever they were doing flood in. I want to talk also about good pain and bad pain.
Oh, please, yes.
One of the places that my work took me early on, and quite by coincidence and accidents, yeah, we don't believe in those, um, by destiny, because it happened quite early on in this path, is kinky people, playing
Mm.
with kinky people. The whole notion of good pain, conscious pain, intentional pain as a pleasure, ecstatic, sexy technique, device, path. And at first, of course, being a good tantrika, I was like, oh no, no. And what I'm really doing inside is that looks so hot. But I'm scared. Uh,
I love
since then, I've gotten over the fear.
it.
It took a
Hmm.
while, and I've seen people use conscious, intense sensation. What you and I or someone else might go, God, that looks painful. But if you look at them, they're in bliss because they didn't get there like, they got there
Hmm.
with a slow buildup like you would with a massage or anything else. And I've seen to go to the pinnacle of how good pain can alleviate bad pain if you're into it. I've been to conferences, kinky conferences, like for a weekend, where I've been in a dinner line with someone with a port, someone who is getting IV pain meds on a regular basis, who is in very serious chronic pain.
Mm.
And she's in the lunch line and we're chatting, and she says to me, oh, yeah, the port. I suffer from chronic pain. I said, but not now. She said, the only time I don't suffer from chronic pain is when I'm playing.
Hmm.
So, although it's not a path for everyone, and I just have to say, for anyone who's wondered about that, that the endorphins produced by a conscious application of good pain, and anybody who's ever had great rough sex knows what I mean by good pain. Anybody who's ever enjoyed an erotic spanking gets it. Um, can really help alleviate bad pain.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you're aware. Actually, I wrote an article. I managed an S&M club in Tribeca before I went to social work school. And part of me was just dying of curiosity. And the other part of me, it was like a test to myself to get rid of all my judgments. I'm like, why is everyone here? It's not like the specific fetishes that really intrigued me. It was the why. What's
Yeah.
going on here? What's the relationship? And I ended up becoming really close friends with a lot of these dominatrixes, and I was interested in their point of view. And there were a lot of clients that we had that had chronic health issues, that was the time that they came in, that they could enjoy their lives. They didn't have to be the sick person anymore. They could just be in pleasure. And I was really passionate about getting this out there as how it transformed my experience with chronic pain and how I viewed it with my own chronic pain, because it's all about awareness. It's that consciousness that we bring to the act that completely transforms the experience of it. Just what we see on the outside, we attach our opinions and judgments to what we would think. We're not in
Yes.
that person's body. We don't know. And it's like that person is doing it with awareness and intention. They are purposely going to see someone in a safe space. That's the other thing. Completely safe. The place where I work, they were trained in different things. So it was very clean, very safe. They were educated. They had safe words. If they were ever uncomfortable, they could stop. But this was willingly participating. There's two conscious souls agreeing to act this way for a reason. And it brought a lot of healing for many people. And they were some of the greatest people I'd ever met were those clients. So I think people need to learn how to reframe their judgments when it comes to these experiences of healing. It can come in so many forms.
I have something called the Urban Tantra Professional Training Program, and it's one of my favorite things to do. And I gather sexuality professionals or people who want to use sexuality in their work more together for a week in several places around the world. And what's fascinating is the collection of people we get. We might get a doctor from Britain's National Health and a yoga teacher and an escort and a professional dominatrix, or more than one of all of these. And an artist, there's this huge range. Many of the dominatrixes who show up have the experience of healings on a regular basis. And they come to the class to get some framework, some understanding, and some expansion about that which they have already learned.
Right.
How's this happening, and how can I do it more?
Right. The woman I interviewed in my article, Mary Sin, who's a professional burlesque performer, dominatrix, she talks about how she wishes that she did have better therapist skills because there are so many opportunities for healing, especially in role play and things that can come out from people's past, and they are traumas sometimes. And it's really fascinating for the dominatrix to see, and then they get curious of how can I be better? How can I be of more assistance in this experience? So I think that's totally fascinating to me.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Totally.
So I just wanted to bring that up because I know that there is a relatively new acceptance, appreciation, and curiosity about kink. And many people who may not, just like there's a breath and energy orgasm option for an ecstatic experience, there's also a kinky option for an ecstatic experience. And they come in all flavors. So if you're thinking that, well, I don't know about this Tantra thing, but I sure think it would be peaceful to be blindfolded and tied up. That just sounds really nice to me. Go for it. Go for it.
To relinquish some control. We had a lot of people, because we were so close to Wall Street, a lot of power player CEOs is these people who were in control and had to make decisions and manage everything all day, wanted to relinquish control. And that was their peace, during their lunch hour or whatever.
When I worked as a professional sex worker, that was because I also worked at one of the places I worked was in Tribeca.
Oh.
I had exactly the same clientele.
Interesting.
And it was how, whether it was lap dancing or dominant submission, it was all, you knew you were resetting these guys so that they could get back into it with some semblance of being in their bodies when they left you. That was,
Totally. It gets you into the place where I think we're all actually meant to be in most of the time, because in this world we're busy, we're distracted, we're taught to stay in our mental bodies so much and think and analyze that I don't think people realize that our most natural state is that relaxed way of being in the energy of your
Absolutely.
body.
Absolutely. And we can't stay there all the time, but we, in as you say, we're spending so little time. And even I think when we're sick, or when the culture we're in is so controlling and so pro self-control, that when we should be relaxing, letting go, letting the natural energy work on us to heal us, we're trying to control how that healing looks. There must be something else I can do. There must be something else I can read. Let me check my phone. Maybe there's a new article on this.
Totally. Nope, that's how I was when I was in bed and I started out my own healing. It was really loud, and I just was, thinking about my symptoms all day long. I could only focus on it. And so what I like to teach is how we can use that as, like, pain is an awareness motivator. What is this pointing me towards that's not healed within myself on an emotional level? Why can't I sit here and accept that I know I'm doing everything I can do? Like, why am I putting my focus here, though, when I can put my focus somewhere else? And so that's when I started watching documentaries, and I watched Strange Sex I found on Netflix. And I just started watching all these things that had nothing to do with my disease. And
I'm really, really big on that. And
yeah.
you know, it's like, be careful what you watch.
Yeah.
Obviously, do not go down the Oscar list and pick all the violent movies.
Right.
And it's hard to find one that isn't. Even good movies like Selma, it's like, oh, I can't watch it. I want to, but I can't watch this.
Right.
I'm too much of an empath for this. But things like there's so much wonder in the natural world. I am a documentary freak as
Oh,
well.
totally.
And there's so much wonder to explore in the world, and documentary filmmakers have done that,
Yes.
you know? And so distract, distract, distract. I have a little dog who has brain damage from puppyhood. And you know how they always say you mustn't reward bad behavior?
Mm-hmm.
The way to deal with my little dog is to distract her with food when she gets in a loop.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the distraction is the healing.
Yeah.
It gives her a chance to let her nervous system unwind. That's what's damaged.
Uh-huh.
And it's like her treats do not reward bad behavior. We're so puritanically punishment oriented on ourselves.
True.
You know, how can we support what we want, not trying to bat away what we don't?
It's so true. I mean, the emotional loops and the mental loops I get in my head were what triggered my seizures when I was having those neurological symptoms. And so I needed those things to stop it, to let go, to remind myself, let it go. Let it go, because I'm producing it. After a certain point, I'm feeding into the energy of it. It's my own anxiety about the seizure that's causing the seizure.
Of course. Of course. Of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Wow.
I'm a big fan of that, and just opening our minds to a different way of viewing, and just even the distraction can lead to a discovery that can help your healing. You will never know.
They were just talking about that on NPR today, on some show here in New York, that talked about the fact that we no longer get bored because we're on our phones at any moment where stimulus is not more interesting than the phone.
Right.
So we get no time for an inspiration to strike. We get no downtime to have an aha moment.
It's so true. And we need to learn that reflection, that inner reflection, so we can find that peace. And people don't realize it's totally within their power, that we create so much of the unnecessary drama and loops and the loudness and the noise, and we feed into it with the phone, with all the stimuli that we need. Yeah, I'm so on that wavelength. Yeah. So basically, if you could share with us, just what would you suggest for the chronic pain community, or anybody in emotional pain, anybody in distress, what would be the resources that you would like to point them to as the way that they might be able to release and open up their mind to learn more about what you teach, and how can they find you, and what are the books that you would recommend?
Okay, I'm going to start with a few techniques and then point to some resources.
Great.
First of all, just some awareness that some of the energetic techniques that produce great sex also produce great pain relief.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, we talked about breathing a lot.
Yeah.
Certainly breathing. But making sounds. You can, people who chant, like in ashrams, in temples, there's a reason, or in Catholic churches, whatever, every spiritual tradition has, most of them, some sort of sound or chanting tradition. It's because it takes us to another place.
Mm-hmm.
So often just giving your pain a sound doesn't have to be a scream. It can be a hum, it can be some rhythm, it can be anything, but just thinking about the concept of sound. Using your imagination. If my pain were a color, what would it be? Could I change it to another color? Could I make it a liquid? Could I send it out my feet? Things like that. These are the ways we move. In Tantra, we move erotic energy in the body by using our imagination, whether that's visual or oral or feeling, kinesthetic. We use our imagination to move erotic energy in our bodies. We can move healing energy or pain in our bodies similarly. Other, like I said, for anyone, including people who cannot feel, paraplegics, quadriplegics, sensual touch. And for some people, I knew a paraplegic woman who, if her genitals were stimulated, had orgasms in her nipples. So exploring where touch is good and where it's not, without judgment and with as little fear as possible.
Right.
And in that case, the receiver, remember, is always in control. You do not massage somebody in chronic pain. You ask them where they would like to be touched, and you listen.
Yes. Honor, honor. Yes.
So resources. Although my book is not specifically on the subject of alleviating chronic pain, so much of my work around sex is about energy and could be perhaps adapted successfully by the chronic pain community. So I do recommend Urban Tantra, Sacred Sex for the 21st Century. Mm-hmm. I think Ecstasy is Necessary would also be helpful, because in Ecstasy is Necessary, I wanted to explore how people create joyous, blissful, ecstatic experiences. And everyone can, no matter their circumstance. I remember hearing the story and hearing Rafe Eric Biggs talk about it too, of being able to have orgasms by just being stroked in a one part of the body they could feel that felt good.
Yeah.
Even if it was just a square inch. In Ecstasy is Necessary, I had gotten very angry about the medicalization of everything.
I hear that.
You have to feel up to some perfect 10 standard, right?
Sure.
And if not, we have a monetarized, something that costs something way to help you. Whether it's a shot, a pill, a treatment, a this, or that. And that you're broken.
Yep.
If you're not a 10, you're broken in some way, and you need to get fixed. And I can do that for you. Here's how much it costs. And I wanted people with varying desires to go, you're okay. You might be using your sexual energy in your brand new art career. You might be using it to heal your body. Maybe your idea of an ecstatic experience would be sitting outside with the wind blowing in your face on a spring morning, eating an ice cream cone.
I love that, because it's all about the judgment we put on it. And this society has collectively decided that this is okay, and that this is the system that we can go to define these things for ourselves. And it's not about that answer of what's wrong. It's about what it means for each of us, how we're going to define ourselves.
Exactly.
It's not up to somebody else.
It's when I first started practicing Tantra, and if you want to use my book or some of the other stuff I'll tell you about, I'm going to say this now. Try the technique, whatever it is, the way I write about it, because we have to start somewhere. And after that, start making it your own, making it your own, making it your own. Sit in a different position, breathe at a different rate, imagine red instead of blue. Make it your own. I am so opposed to this one technique will work for everyone. It makes me crazy. But the way you're supposed to do it, the way it's supposed to work.
There's no right or wrong. There's no supposed to. There's no it should look like this. Like, healing is linear. It's all bullshit, quite frankly. Healing happens in layers and spirals. You go forwards, you go backwards. It's all over the place.
And like what they said, what does this go back? Was it the 60s, the 70s? If it feels good, do that.
Right. Yeah, like, what's easy for you? What's peace? What brings you peace? Move in the direction of that. I mean, it's a simple...
So Ecstasy is Necessary. Although that title may sound like ecstasy, I can't even get to pleasant. But Ecstasy is Necessary has a whole lot of techniques about moving in steps toward the ecstatic. And you see, ecstasy to me is not absence of pain. Ecstasy is often cathartic. It's often challenging, and it often has an erotic component and it often has a spiritual component. And it's a life resetting kind of event. So it's not about attaining some sort of perfect pleasure. It's about the process of living life with an ecstatic attitude, really.
Living in bliss is that wholeness, appreciation without the judgment.
Exactly. So those are two of my books. I have, if you want to learn the breath and energy orgasm technique, I have a class, an online class called Orgasms with Spirit. And if you go to my website, barbaracarrellas.com, that's Carrellas with two R's and two L's.
We'll give the links to everybody.
Okay. You might find elements of that course useful. What else? I like I teach a lot of workshops, so you can check out my event calendar and see where I'm going to be next. I do everything from kinky events to spiritual events, not that kinks isn't spiritual, but to tantric events, to intro events, to advanced. So please join me. I also like to hear from people who have found alternative erotic routes to healing. So please email me if there's something you'd like to share with me. And as I said, I'd really like to reach out to the community of women who have had clitorectomies to various degrees, because I'm very interested in training women to help others in their community.
Yeah, and something I'm looking forward to. I have an interview with people who specialize in chronic pain, medical doctors, and female pelvic pain who have these issues. And so that'll be coming out soon for everybody that's watching, is the specific medical issues, because there are more women that have these issues than you would think. And there's so much shame around it, and they need to know that there's ability to have pleasure back into their lives.
Exactly. And that pleasure is a many splendored thing is what came to mind, but pleasure is available in so many different ways than we are told.
Right, we put the limits on ourselves, that there are options, and this is why I'm just so grateful for your time and that you've shared this amazing.
This is a hugely important community to me. I've always sought ways to learn more from this community, and so anything I can do to be of assistance only gives me more tools. So thank you too.
Oh, well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time, and I'll put the links for everybody below. And have a beautiful day.
Too.
All right.